Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. It's Stephanie here. Welcome to episode 47 of Ask the Angels, where we answer your rent to rent questions. And if you have a burning rent to rent question that you want to ask me, go to renttoRentSuccess.com/ask, ASK. Ask your question there for me to answer here. And this week, I have got a special guest. Jason Lazurus is joining me to answer this week's question, and you'll see why in a minute. Jason is a podcast guru. What Jason doesn't know about podcasting is not worth knowing. He helps business owners become podcasters, and he shows you how to do it in a way which massively boosts your business too. And Jason has his own podcast, which is how I met him originally. It's called the British Blacktrepreneur Podcast. And I was also a guest on Jason's podcast, but we'll be talking about that more as we go through the show. So welcome to the show, Jason Lazurus. How are you doing, Jay?
Hi, Stephanie. Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me on, and I can't wait to get stuck into today's conversation.
Well, neither can I. So Rahul wants to set up a podcast. Let's start off with the basics. Why would a business owner want to start a podcast? Isn't it terribly time consuming?
I think one of the first things that any business owner or anybody for that matter needs to ascertain is their own why. Why do they want to start a podcast? Now, if you are a business owner, is it for leads for your business? Do you want to get in more sales? Do you want to connect with your customer base? Do you want to maybe have something for your staff or people that you work with or people that work for you? So finding out the goals and the actual mission of why you want a podcast is really, really important. Some people, and I've experienced and I've spoken to, when they want a podcast, it could be simply for networking. Originally, that was what I wanted to do in my first podcast. I'm sure we can talk about that at a later date. That didn't quite work out. But the goal was just to connect with people, to see how things would go. Then you need to think about, as a business owner, what is your goal? What do you want to achieve? What's your real why? Because the why will enable you to keep on going. And what you don't want to have happen is what we call pod fading, whereby you get started, you're really excited, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go. This is going to be fantastic. 3 months in, you've got to reach out to that guest, you've got to fill out that form, you've got to edit your show, you've got to market it, and it all gets very time consuming unless you've got a real why behind you, which will ultimately enable you to have a strong workflow. So I think that's a question that the business owner must ask themselves. Why is it they want a podcast? Then from that point on, I'm sure we can talk about this. It can then really help you and enable you to keep on going and to work out the best strategy you could use going forward in order for you to continue to podcast and to do it successfully.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I have just found that it's been so phenomenal. Being on the podcast, it enables us to share the rent to rent information with so many more people. And I know that today's question is not specifically rent to rent, but I do get so many questions from people who are building businesses, sometimes in rent to rent, sometimes outside. And I thought this would be a great one to bring you on to answer. And I was just looking at my Buzzsprouts statistics. That's where I host my platform, and I'm just on the cusp. I'm not quite there yet of 100,000 downloads ever, and a
Woo!
hundred. Yeah, thank you. 176 episodes published.
Wow.
So, and it's been so fun, and so many people message and so on and say they binge listen the show, and it's been helping them to get started with their businesses. So, what I think would be helpful, Jason, is why don't you tell us about your podcast?
All right, so my podcast is called The British Blacktrepreneur, and the aim of the show is to promote, educate, and inspire Black entrepreneurs in the UK. One of them, I suppose, a sub aim as well is to see 1,000 Black entrepreneurs podcasting. So I want to really gauge, really seek out Black entrepreneurs in the UK to find out what their businesses are doing, what they're up to. I suppose for me, I'm seeing it as a point of education for myself because I'm learning more and more about business. I'm learning more and more about what it takes to become a business owner. And I've coupled that with podcasting. So I've spoken to many entrepreneurs, yourself, Emmanuel Suko, Timmy Merriman Johnson, many, and I've got at least 20 or 22 episodes that will be coming out Not next week. Next week is when I'm launching, but I'll have 3 or 4 then to launch off with. But I've batch recorded. I've got so many different entrepreneurs I'm talking to. So my niche, because they say the riches are in the niches, is Black entrepreneur in the UK. And that's where I'm really focusing on. And I've even appealed to Black entrepreneurs to come onto the show. If they've got a business, if they're excited about talking about what they're doing, I want to hear from them, because I'm just seeing it as me gaining a plethora of knowledge about the different businesses and the Black owners in the UK. Also, I think one of the main things, or one of my whys, was not seeing enough Black entrepreneurs growing up. And, it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Richest Man in Babylon, that really enabled me to really think about, okay, if I want to start a business, why haven't I seen people like me? Although they've probably always been there, whether that's in the mainstream media, whether that's people around me. And I managed to now seek out those people like yourself. I mean, I met somebody else who's a social entrepreneur, had dinner at his house, and we really had a good exchange. So it's been really good having these conversations. And I like to speak, I like to find things out, and I kind of really get nosy and get really into the business and try to find out so much so that it can really add to what I'm trying to do as well. So it's learning for me, and it's learning for the listener, I hope, too, as well.
Yeah, Jason, and I love your show. I mean, I've been on as a guest, and I think you do have, as you say, that very probing style. So you bring out things that maybe don't come out normally in an interview. And I just want to encourage people to follow you. If you're watching on the website, then you will see on the video Jason's Instagram handle. It's at _British_Blacktrepreneur, and it's Jason Lazurus on Instagram. So do follow, and then you'll get notified when the new episodes and so on come out.
Thank you so much.
So brilliant. So you've got your podcast, but let's just start off, because where do people go wrong, Jason, when they have the idea, I want to set up a podcast? What are the 3 biggest mistakes that you see people making in podcasting?
I think the one thing, and I mentioned this before, is making sure that you niche down. It's really important that there's an old saying, talk to everyone and talk to no one. If you don't niche down and find out your tribe, who you're actually trying to speak to, who your target audience is, I suppose it's like in business. If you don't actually nail down who the product or service is for, then they're going to be none the wiser as to, well, who you aiming this at. And then it ends up on WhatsApp broadcasts or just random Instagram stories, because you don't know who you're speaking to. So niche down, that's really, really important. Secondly, have a budget in mind. Some people, when they get started, they just seem to buy so much stuff that they probably don't need. I need a Rodecaster Pro. Oh, I need to get this light. I need this mic. And really, you don't need that. I mean, I've helped somebody podcast with the minimalist of things. A cheap mic, you got a laptop, you got a smartphone. That's all you really need. So a lot of people just spend too much money, or they go crazy, or they look at Joe Rogan and think, oh, I want to get 2 big Roadmaster mics. I'm thinking that's about $5,000 each. Now you might not have the money for that, so you probably don't. So let's just stick with what we can afford. So affordability, and make sure that you're budgeting. That's really important. And thirdly, I would say scheduling and timing. People have to understand if they've got the time to do this. It is very time consuming. How are you going to edit your show? How are you going to market it? How are you going to maybe think about your workflow? So when are you going to do certain tasks? Because there's a lot of things that you need to factor in when you're podcasting, and reaching out to guests, receiving a notification as to when they want to come on. So I would say those are some of the 3 major things that I see people kind of go wrong, but they can be fixed with a few tweaks, when they're starting to podcast or prior to beginning their shows.
Yeah, so a few good things to think about there. So the first one, you were saying, don't run away with the budget, and you can actually do with some inexpensive kit. So let's just take the microphone, for example. That's one where people might go crazy. So what would you recommend as an affordable then option for someone who's starting off?
So the Samsung Q2U, which is about £70, 60, £70, it's a USB microphone. So it plugs into any laptop, any computer. Very good for starting off. I actually believe mics are overhyped. To be fair, if you really wanted to start off, you could just use your phone. Make sure you're in a quiet space, you're in a quiet area, hit record, speak, interview. You can find out how to do that via Anchor or whatever hosting platform, whatever recording software, that you're using. Get it into your podcast host and get it out there. Obviously, there's a lot more steps to it than that. But if you're initially starting off, you could just use your phone. But I would say a really good mic, the Samsung Q2U is really good. There are others that you could use, like the Rodecaster Pro, which is kind of about the £100 mark. So they're good starting points. But if you haven't got that kind of money, and that's fine, that everybody does, just use your smartphone to get you started. And as you build and as you save up, or maybe you can have a side hustle that can bring in some money, then you level up bit by bit. I mean, I use a Shure SM7B microphone. I didn't start off using that. I started off using the laptop, the mic in my laptop. The sound was awful. The quality was terrible. But I did it because I loved it and I really had a good time doing it. And that show didn't kind of work out for other reasons. But then I used the USB mic. And that was okay. It was a snowball, I think. Didn't really like that. Then I managed to get the Shure SM7B. Then I got an audio interface, and it's gradual. Don't think you have to be like everybody else with all, I know someone that podcasts in their car, in their driveway in Australia, and she's done a great job. She's done really, really well. And that's her job now because she's committed to it and she's done it and she's found a way to monetize what she's doing. It's about passion before anything. So don't get lost in the mic, just get lost in the conversation.
Oh, I love that. And that's funny because I've got your favorite mic. I've got a Samsung Q2U.
Yes, wonderful. And they're really, really good. I think it's a
got it
great
here
starting point. Yeah, there you go. That's it.
on one of those arms.
Yes.
So it's not on the desk. So that's good. We've talked about the mistakes people make, but what are, and I know you'll be able to help us here, what are the 3 secrets for success?
Whew. Okay, I would say 3 secrets for success. First one, you have to have good audio quality. I think the audio quality must be good. Yes, initially, you might not get that straight away, but even with a good phone in a quiet area, it doesn't need to sound like a voiceover. It just needs to be quality audio. Number 2, consistency. In my first show I had called the Inner City Actors Podcast, I wasn't consistent with my show. I would release one on Monday, one 2 weeks later, one 10 days later. You're not going to be able to get an audience or a tribe or any kind of a serious following if people don't know when you're going to turn up. So that's really important. And I would say the third thing is have some really good artwork, because that gives the impression that you're a professional podcaster rather than an amateur one. So I went on 99 Designs, Buzzsprout, which that you use for your podcast, is a really good hosting platform. They have lots of discounts. And so if you save up a bit of money, I got mine for about 50, 60 pounds, and loads of designers compete around the world over a 3-day period, and they show you all the different designs that pop up, and then you pick the one that you think best suits your brand, best suits you and what you're trying to do. So for me, I'd say those are the 3 main things, audio quality, consistency, and having a really nice picture that kind of conveys the message and meaning of your podcast.
I like that. That makes it seem so simple. So how do you help people? Because I remember before I started, Jason, I'd put off starting a podcast for quite a long time because it just seemed so confusing. I had no idea how people were doing it. How do you record it? How do you edit it? How do you put it out? I didn't understand it at all.
So one of the things I did is that I went on a course with London Real by a guy named Brian Rose, and he's an American that lives in the UK, and he's got a fantastic podcast, a fantastic business that's based around business, podcasting, lifestyle, and something else I can't remember. And he actually ran for political office for mayor about 18 months ago. So he's doing really big things. So I learned from somebody that I felt was really credible, and he is got a really good following. And so he taught me kind of the 7 steps of how to do it. So what I've done is with my experience with having a failed podcast, renewing a new show, I've kind of put together just nothing concrete yet. It's not on a website, nothing yet. It's still in its sort of building stage. Just some steps for people to follow, starting off with why they want a podcast, choosing their equipment, how they can edit, what they need to do in terms of asking questions, how to reach out to guests. And I've put all of that kind of like in some Google Docs at the moment. So it's all in Google Docs, and I've helped 2 podcasters already just to get their show out there, just to help them really with making sure they they go through those steps. And it's really enabled them to have a successful show. Well, at least they've got started and they're successful with it because they really like what they've done. So that's kind of the steps and process that I'm taking people through at the moment. And it's been fun. It's been good. And I'm looking forward to doing many, many more.
So if people are watching or listening and thinking, oh dear, Jason's disappeared. So what I want to explain is that you can start your show. You can contact Jason if you would like him to help you start your show. And he's on Instagram. It's at _British Blacktrepreneur. And if you go to our webpage for this podcast, it's renttorentsuccess.com/ATA47, ATA47. That stands for Ask the Angels 47. Then the show notes will be there, and there'll be a link to Jason's Instagram. So if you'd like to start podcasting, if you'd like Jason to help you get it set up, he's a great guy and he can really help you fly. And if you'd like to know more about Rent to Rent, I know it wasn't so much about Rent to Rent, but these questions usually are very Rent to Rent specific. You can go to renttorentsuccess.com/guide, GUIDE, and you'll get access to our free 90-minute Rent to Rent Masterclass and guide. That is all for this week. Amazing to see you all. See you next week. Bye for now.